Well, good evening. It's my pleasure to come up here to Sedona and meet with you, Bill. Why don't you state for the record here for the viewers that are going to be watching this, whether it's through earthorigins.com or the outpostforum.com, if you could just give us your name, age, and where we're located.
You want the age too?
How about an approximation?
Oh, 76.
Good.
And
We're in
Sedona, and you want a little.
And your
background?
name is?
Oh, my name is William Watson.
There we go.
Actually, for a number of years, I went by a code name, which was Barney. And,
Correct.
Other than that, I'll leave it up to you to lead me in.
I think where I'd like to start is if you could take us back to when you were 12 years old and you're living up in the Northwest in Oregon, I believe.
Correct.
And you pretty much at that point in time had what you considered to be your first experience. Why don't you tell us about what happened to you and your friend that night as a 12-year-old in Oregon?
Well, the two of us, like you said, were 12 years old. It was 1949, and we'd hitchhiked into town and saw a movie. And on our way back, we had a mile of road to walk into the back country there, so to speak, to where our family was, or where we lived. And we were coming up on the final lap of it, which had been about, maybe 100 meters more, and then we'd been at the farmhouse. And we lit up. And it took a long time for us to remember this, because we forgot it. What happened is that my mother died in 1987, I think it was, and the same boy, now he's a man, he was there, and I walked across the room, and he's sitting over there on the edge by the fireplace, and he looked up, and the first thing he said was, you remember when we lit up? And it was like we could think about it, and we could talk about it. Up until then, we could never talk about it with other people, especially when we were with a group or without any other person. Alone, it'd come to mind, but that'd be the only time. And then you'd forget it again.
Now, when you lit up, when you talk about the experience of being lit up, and if you're looking back at it and you're looking at yourself and your friend, is it as if a car is approaching you and you have light in your eyes, or is it like when you're in front of the movie theater that night and the marquee above you and you have lights coming down upon you? What was your sensation of where the light was coming from?
Well, I have to go forward to tell you how this was, because in 2007, they regressed me for PTSD, or
what they thought was
PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes through the Veterans Association. And the first thing that they brought me back to was that evening that this happened. It was about 10 o'clock on an August evening. And we actually glowed, the two of us. We just glowed.
You just felt as though you're glowing. It's not like there was light around you.
Well, we couldn't put out it wasn't a light that make it go on to something else or make a shadow behind somebody or something like that. We just glowed.
You didn't notice the shadow?
Right.
Do you remember feeling any sensations such as heat or
No.
cold?
There was no sensation whatsoever. And when they regressed me, I could, as a viewer, that's how they hypnotically regressed me. And I could see the two of us glowing, and all of a sudden there was kind of like a shaft of light came down from an oval opening. I can't say it was round; it was more oval, and it slowly turned to blue, to a light blue.
The light is
And
blue,
then
or is
we-
the opening blue?
Yep,
The
it
light
was
is
a white
blue.
light, but it turned to a light blue, and once it did, then we just floated up and through into that opening. We were vertical. We weren't,
Right. You never went horizontal. You didn't
No.
lay down.
but wasn't aware of it originally. I was only aware of it by watching it as an observer.
Okay. So as you're observing this and you're seeing yourself and your friend while you're going through your hypnotherapy, and
Well,
you
he's
see
still
yourself
alive, by the way.
coming up into the oval opening, do you see anything around the opening itself?
No, it was like fog, white fog, but not a fog. It was like it was obscured to some degree. And like I said, this gentleman's still alive today,
Mm-hmm.
and he only recently, being a couple of years, he gave me the okay to talk about him and if bring him into the subject, because he, for a number of years, he acted like it was a frightening experience. Maybe I'm just too stupid. I didn't know the difference. But I do know that once we got in there, next thing I know, I'm looking at myself lying on a plastic white table. And I'm naked, but I can't remember taking my clothes off or anything. I didn't-
Right.
only thing I can remember is what I observed, and I'm skeptical about hypnosis. So sometimes, maybe this is suggestive. I don't know.
Could be. It's hard to tell, but at least while you're going through this hypnotic session, you're, as you stated, you're viewing yourself experiencing this. Are you seeing both yourself and your friend? You see both of you on the
he
tables?
wasn't there.
You don't see him, you
After
just
we
see
went
yourself.
into that opening, I didn't see him again until we left. We were on the ground, and I was being held by. It was just a little thin brown arm holding me, or maybe steadying me. I don't know. And I had heard a voice, and I remember this. I knew before. I mean, when he mentioned that, you remember when we lit up, this came back to memory. So it wasn't what I was really viewing. This is what I remember in the actuality.
Right.
And I remember this voice saying, "Let him go or release them." I don't know if it was in my mind, or I don't know if it was.
Don't know if you
a
heard
voice,
it or thought it, right?
Orally spoken. I don't know. Next thing I remember is we're running, and then when I remember running by a row of mailboxes that were where we got our mail,
Mm-hmm.
and down the little. I don't remember running down the little road. Next thing I remember is running up on the porch of the farmhouse, and it was a wooden porch, and we were clomping there, and we were trying to. I think we both were trying to knock on the door. We were, frightened, 12 years old.
Is this just
This
a
is
neighbor's farmhouse, or
no,
was this
ours.
your? This was actually
our-
your house.
My
Okay.
my farmhouse.
Your
he
folks'
lived further
farmhouse.
up the road from
Okay.
where I did.
But you're knocking on your own door.
Yeah, and my mother, we never used the front door. It was always locked, but everybody left the back door unlocked. But she opened the door, and he was standing behind her, and she says, "This is her exact word. Don't worry, it's been happening all evening out in the back pasture." And that was the first thing I could. it seemed to calm us down. And we just simply turned around and walked off the porch and walked around the house. And I don't remember the full walking around on the little boardwalk. But next thing I know, we're going up the little hill that went up to the chicken house that I slept in. And it was a little bunkhouse my brother and I had. And when I was viewing it under regression, I remember looking out to my right as I went in before going in the door. When I went in the door, I don't remember what happened. Well, we went to bed. I don't have any of that knowledge. Don't even remember the next morning. But that evening, just before we entered the farmhouse, I looked off, and there's these flat satellites, only they were flat facing up instead of sideways, and they were, each one had 3 prongs coming down. There were 4 of them, and they came down in a V, and it was blue, light blue, about the same color blue as was that shaft of light.
Right, that night before.
And there's something moving out there, but I couldn't focus on it, just like little brown or black objects. And that's it.
And that was it. Let's go back a little bit to when you were first brought up into and through the oval. And you said the next thing you saw, it appeared to be kind of foggy, not too sharp and clear in detail, and you're seeing yourself lying on this white plastic platform or table or bed or
they had
whatever you want to call
lamps,
it.
though.
Are there lamps on?
There were 3 lamps, and they were like goosenecks, only not like the metal ones we see that like you put wire through.
Mm-hmm.
They were like goose. I don't know how you could describe it. It was just lamps, 3 of them, and then there was it was like a small machine, but it didn't make sense. It didn't have dials or anything. It was just something sitting behind my head, and there were 2 guys, or 2 people or beings, one on each side of me, doing things to me.
Such as, well, look at the beings first, and as you're recalling this and you're going through it, what do you notice about them? Is there anything about them that you notice regarding their...
They were wearing goggles.
They were wearing goggles.
It looked...
Or it looked like goggles.
They were like welder's goggles they were wearing. And
dark?
Yeah, they were dark.
Very dark.
But I couldn't see features of the face and stuff like that.
As if there was a mask, or were they clothed?
No, they were without, but it was just fuzzy. I guess I'm viewing this, and I was more interested in what they were doing, more so than...
What's the sensation you have of what they were doing?
It's like they knew I was there. That was the oddest thing, because one kept trying to use the one on the in my right. He was always trying to maneuver, because I was just above him somehow, looking at him, and he tried to maneuver so I couldn't see it. It was like they knew I was there. And then the guy on my left, while this guy's maneuvering, the guy on the left took a scoop out of my kneecap right down in here, right about here. And it fascinated me, because it was like taking a piece out of a melon, because it didn't bleed or anything. It was just pink.
Just a little scoop, and did he do it with
pink.
his
It was about a 1/4 inch.
fingers, or did he have a tool?
He had a little tool.
A little tool.
And it just made a little scoop. And
what do you see him doing with the scoop after he takes it?
I don't remember.
Don't recall that?
I don't recall that, because the next thing I know, there's somebody standing in the shadows just off, because it was lit over me.
Right.
But there's somebody standing over there just beyond, had been on my left. And this is a guy on the left that took the scoop out of my right knee. There's somebody behind him, and I couldn't see just what he looked like. I just knew he was there. It was like there's no describing him.
Right.
And then I turned around, like I was just kind of floating around, and look, there's a guy standing there. It looked like he was about half a head taller than the rest. And he's got it was like a little piece of rectangular plastic he was maneuvering or something. But I didn't focus on him that much. And then, like I said, the next thing I remember is being on the ground.
Okay, well, you're remembering the three people around you. Did you get anything or an impression regarding the dimensions of the room or color of the room or size of the ceiling or anything like that?
It was, in my mind, I'd probably say it was oval, but that's just because I'm thinking it was in an oval ship.
Okay. No sensations then of windows or doors or anything like that?
Nothing. In fact, it seemed like it was enclosed there.
Okay. Any other equipment that you see beyond what you indicated that you saw behind your head?
No.
Or what the one person that you said you saw something small like maybe the size of a pack of cigarettes or of a cell phone? Was it size-wise?
The taller
person that you saw?
It's about 6. It wasn't square, it was rectangular, but it was flat. It's kind of like looking at what we use as a kind of a palette to write on or something. It didn't make sense because it wasn't.
Some of the cell phones get a little bigger, like this.
But it was white. I remember.
It was white, okay, in color.
Yeah, and that was it. There wasn't anything. I didn't see it.
If you look at his hand, what do you see? Do you see 5 fingers?
No. Actually, I never didn't see or count the fingers. I remember thinking I should be looking at fingers. Oh, I remember the guy on my right side. Well, he was trying to cover me so I couldn't watch. He was also had 2 fingers, and he didn't have a thumb. I don't think. But anyway, he was measuring. Right about in here, down to somewhere around in here, something like this. And I don't know what he was doing. I was trying to focus on him, and then the guy took that scoop out. That fascinated the hell out of me. I had to see that. That way made more sense. But
okay. And then after you saw the guy standing in the background, somewhat in the shadows, making notes or whatever it appeared to be doing,
I couldn't see him doing anything. I just knew
sitting there
holding
a body that was holding there. And do you recall any sensation of what you were feeling, as if you were floating or you were laying down at that point in time? Were you actually touching the surface of the table you're on?
I was really, personally, I was just. I could see it, and if I wanted to turn, it was like I didn't turn my head. It was just like I turned.
Right, you with your eyes.
Hypnosis. If I wanted to look to the right, I just
your angle changes a bit in the room.
Right.
Okay.
And that's how it was.
The next thing that you recall then is
being on the ground.
Being on the ground. Now, you said you had a sensation of somebody steadying you when you were on the ground.
Yeah, it was like. I don't know if they were steadying my body.
But they were holding onto your arm?
It just touching. It was like they were holding on, but not very tight. Not like you're tight. Just like somebody would kind of steady you,
Did you get a sensation? Do you have a sensation of the feel of the person? You're not feeling it. So you can't tell if there's warmth or cold or a glove or skin?
No. When I was... What I could remember of it is... We were standing in the, for some reason, we were standing in an empty pasture with barbed wire between us and the road, and all of a sudden we're running on the roadway. And it was just after whatever that voice said, release him or let him go. I don't know which it was. Next thing I know, I'm over that fence, and how we got over it, I have no.
And when you're sitting there with the person or the being that's holding you or steadying you,
standing.
Are you standing?
Yes.
Okay. Is that same light, that glow, where you indicated you were glowing, and or the shaft
I wasn't
of light?
glowing, but when I was after we left I left the ship, I guess. operating room, whatever you want to call it. We weren't glowing then. The only time we glowed was when we first were taken.
And then we're going up. Okay, back to when the being is holding you, and you said you looked down and you thought that you saw brown as being the color of the hand that was holding
like
you.
Light tan, brown.
Light tan, okay.
It was
And
thin.
and once again, if you look at it, right, the shape of the hand and or fingers, is there anything that comes to you from that? Number of fingers or texture
No.
that you're looking at?
It was just like a soft. You just like somebody just touching it.
Right, not really gripping you, but just
No.
touching. Okay.
And in fact, when I went in '76, when I went in on that recovery, that's the same thing. Same thing I remember of that carrying this. There were two of us carrying him, and I just remember that brown arm. I don't remember hands and.
Just the arm that was somewhat
kind
there.
of-
Okay. And then when you got back to your farmhouse and your mother answered the door and you indicated that your father was standing behind your mother.
He was there,
But
but he didn't
say anything.
No.
He didn't have a word to say other than your mother's what seemed to be reassuring words of this has been going on all night.
Yeah, she says, don't worry, it's been happening all evening out in the
happening all
back
evening.
pasture. That is like it's ingrained in me.
Right.
And
And you didn't feel any fear to go back to the chicken coop that you slept in, despite the fact you're going back into the dark and.
no, but there later, as after I thought back on it, for after the session was over with and everything, and things have started to come back, fragmented but small amounts. And that was one of the things that I could remember is that I'd have nosebleeds, which is, and I remember some kind of like a little piece of luminose, and this little thing came out. But it didn't make much sense. It was nothing at the time because it was just a kid. The thing that frightened me the most is I'd wake up and I'd be at the end of the bed under the covers, and it'd be so tight that I couldn't move. And I'd try to yell, and of course I was so frightened. I don't know now. Maybe this was nighttime nightmares or something. But I'd try to yell, and I could. Of course, it wouldn't have done me any good. I didn't live in the house.
Right, you're out back in the
But
chicken coop.
I'd be in that under the bed. I mean, down inside of the bed, and this was a bunk bed made with. We just had a little tick mattress on top of ropes that we slept on, and it'd be so tight that I couldn't move,
Right.
just totally. And I think I was feeling like I couldn't breathe.
Did you have any sensations of being held down, or
It was only being tightly covered.
just being tight because of the?
And I'd be in the bed because it was just. How are you going to make anything that, like a little bunk bed is about 4, 5 foot long? My dad made it out of 2x4s and then laced it. We were pretty poor.
Sure.
But the thing was that it was always that happened more than once, and that was the most frightening thing of the whole experience. Nothing else ever.
No other sensations with that came about other than the nosebleeds that you would have.
And the nosebleeds, and as well as the that little piece of black, like about half the size of a BB, and it came out. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it really or not.
Did the nosebleeds continue after that came out?
That I don't remember.
Just around that time, you remember that happening.
Right.
Okay. What did you do with it when you saw it?
Threw it away.
Just threw it away. Didn't tell your mother or anything.
No, because back at '49, that was really before we had a lot of the sightings. So, but the oddest thing is where I was raised. It isn't far from where the they had other sightings with the Arnold had his sightings with the craft in July and around, not on, but nearby Mount Rainier.
Sure.
So all of this happens in the same area, and as well as Murray Island, I don't know how they even pronounce it, sighting
Right,
by
Maury Island. Right. Now, do you recall any of the Ken Arnold, the infamous
recall some of what
flying
I've
skipping
read.
discs? But when you at the time, do you recall something like that being in the news or seeing it on the newsreels? When you
No,
went to
no.
movies?
But there was one thing about this is that see, what is his? There were the two guys that had the boat that were they go up shag logs out of. They'd find logs and they'd take them down to the mills and sell them. That they were part of the Murray Island, whatever they call it, sighting. They docked their boat right there where I lived.
Oh, okay.
So all of this was within the same. It was a couple of years after their sightings, but it was always in that same area, and so there were probably sightings. People every time I tell somebody from there, oh yeah, I saw this and I saw that, but they don't have a time frame, so I can't put two and two together.
Right, right. But do you recall anything else happening at the time? People talking about lights in the skies or anything else of?
Well, there probably were, but 12 years old.
Nothing that you paid
mine
attention
was-
to or knew about.
I was going to go to high
sure.
school the next year, so that was a big thing in my
Sure.
mind. I was scared to death.
That was going to be the next thing you were going to do. Okay, we're going to skip forward quite a bit, and let's talk about your time in the Army. Specifically, going well forward to when I believe you were stationed in Panama, correct?
Right.
And you're in Panama, and why don't you just tell us a little bit about that? Who were you stationed with? What brigade were you in? For instance, or-
Actually, I was in brigade. I was still in Special Forces.
Okay.
And I was in the 8th first, and then they changed it over to the 7th. At the time, it was 7th, I believe, in 1975, when we got a call, we got an alert, and
Well, before you even get into that, let's just talk about your time. And what were your duties while you were stationed there, and where were you in Panama?
well, I went there originally as I think it was a radio communicator, which was Special Forces radio, which is a hell of a lot different from others. We used CWIMC codes, stuff like that. And then I became an intelligence analyst for the team, and then eventually became the team sergeant. And it was over a period of 6 years. So
that you were back and forth to this area, or
no,
you were
I was
actually
there all the
for
time
6
in
years?
Panama.
Okay.
We were on the Atlantic side of Panama.
Okay. And what were the years?
Isthmus. Pardon?
What were the years that you were there?
1970. Well, I went there in November 1970, so there really wasn't that much of a time period there. And then I left there in 1976, last part of it, around
Okay.
that same time.
Okay. Down near the isthmus on the Atlantic side.
Atlantic side.
Okay. And what were your typical days like as while you were stationed there?
Well, typical days were whatever your mission was at the time. Special Forces is different, or was different as the regular conventional forces. They'd give you a job, and today you might go down, just take you into the Darien Gap and put up a radio station, or you might be training Panamanians. National Guard at that time was their police and everything, but we train them, and we train conventional soldiers in setting up antennas, or for that matter, working with not satellites, but explain to them the differences between the ionosphere and etc.
Bounce signals. Off. Sure.
Yeah, this is what it was all about.
Okay.
And then we also would take pack trains of horses into the jungles, and depending on the situation, use boats in the surf to come in on different islands and stuff. It was never training like in war, because we were trained more to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And so we taught by example as well as with the people with us.
The Panamanian National Guard is who you're working with, or other people in the Army?
Chileans and
they would also come up for training? Okay.
They come there, you're right. In fact,
okay.
We trained the group that took out Allende. I hate to say this, but that's about what
they came up there for their training, sure.
It was a battalion of, I have a plaque in there. They said we took them from the horse to the clouds, which we taught them how to, on a helicopter.
Right.
And repel from it and cross rivers and stuff
okay.
like this.
Now, occasionally there were some other missions that you were brought to bear upon, and one of those involved a trip that you took. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, how that came about, and the journey
talking
itself?
About the trip to Puerto Rico.
Correct.
Well, as usual. By the way, my commander, I believe at the time, in fact I know at the time, was Lieutenant Colonel Jim Greitz, Bo Greitz. You see, is the one that has his name in the paper quite often, or used to.
Used to, sure.
It was Ruby Ridge and places like this. And so he was my commander, but, you know, we saw him infrequently because we pretty well commanded ourselves. And anyway, our team got alerted one night, and we, in fact, I believe he was there, but I can't verify this in my mind as whether that's really valid or not. But anyway, we were taken out to an airfield and boarded a C-130 and flew around for about 5 or 6 hours. We just thought it was a training mission, which happens quite often.
So you weren't, when you boarded the C-130, you weren't told what the mission was, where you were going?
Had no idea. In fact, they hadn't even given us any. That's when we used to use crystals for the calling radios and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have anything. They didn't give us any. So we just.
How many of there were you?
Actually, I think there were 6 of us, and that's the reason I call it a half team, because it was the Special Forces team was 12 men. I believe I had half. I don't remember an officer being with us, and so and usually.
So you would have been the non-com
what
in charge.
In charge was, and I remember we flew around, and they told us to jump, and
oh, you're in parachutes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was when we jumped. It was so dark. It was like jumping into a coal mine.
But they're having you jump, but they're not telling you what you're jumping into?
No, other than we always carried weapons and ammunition anyway. So
live.
We were always prepared for whatever it was. And we jumped, and I remember I released my knee pack, which is, we had you carry your equipment in and stuff. And it hit the ground at the same time I hit the ground. Usually it drops 100 feet, and then you ease into make your practice landing fall, but there's no practice. You got one chance, and that's it. But I landed and jarred the hell out of me. But I figured it had to be a combat jump, which was about 600 or 800 feet. But we usually jumped at 1250. And so I was getting my parachute together, and hadn't seen any lights or anything. Hadn't seen any lights on the drop zone or anything. And I heard somebody call my name, Barney. And so I went over towards sound, and I told him, I said, well, I'm S-rolling my chute and packing it and stuff. He said, let somebody else take care of it. And he said, get in the Jeep, you're going for a briefing.
Now, was this one of the guys from your
This
team
is
that you jumped
some
with?
buck sergeant I had never even seen before. Didn't even know the Jeep was parked there. And I got in the Jeep, and
Army buck sergeant.
Yeah.
Okay.
He took me to, we drove a little ways, and I didn't pay much attention. I figured, well, they were taking me down to give me a briefing. Some kind of a training mission, whatever it was. I didn't even know it was in Puerto Rico. I thought I could have been Costa Rica or any place like this, which wasn't anything new. And they took me to this wooden building. It looked like one of the buildings like you'd find at similar to the buildings we had in Panama for the team house, our team company.
Something like a barracks, or
Yeah, but it was wooden, and it was old, probably World War II type. And we went in, and instead of going upstairs, we went down into the basement, and we went across, and it was about as long as this room, which was about 20 foot, and there was it was concrete floor. And we went through the door there. There was a guy standing there, parade rest, buck sergeant. And I didn't think much about it. And when I got through the door, I realized that I was in a cage area where we usually were signed out documents, top secret or confidential, whatever you could you had a need to know. And I looked over, and there was a cage, and I was just walking in the door, and the guy was in the cage there, and he says, come over here and sign this. He's pointing, he didn't say anything. So I went over and signed my name, and he handed me a packet, and he said, well, it wasn't a packet, it was actually a piece of 8 by 10 paper. It had top secret on it, and then had a manual on it. And the manual's about 6 by 8, somewhere around there. And he said, you got 20 minutes to read this. I said, 20 minutes to read this? What? I was figuring, well, maybe this is the scenario of the program, of whatever it was. And I just went over and sat, and he had a little telephone table, World War II type, and there was a chair there. I was facing him, and I sat down. And 20 minutes, I knew I couldn't read it. So I thought, I just started flipping through it. And because I thought it was pictures, I can always, that might make
Sure.
it get my interest, because I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to read. And looked, and on the right, left-hand page was drawings at the top. And they were just drawings. And there was cigar-shaped, there were 2 cigar-shaped craft, but they didn't look like craft, they looked like drawings.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
hand-drawn
fingers, yeah.
Hand-drawn into the manual, or part of the printing inside the manual?
No, it was just
somebody
hand-drawn.
drew it. Okay.
Well, it had been printed on there, but it had been done by a draftsman. It wasn't photos or anything.
Oh, okay. I wanted to clarify whether somebody had doodled this there, or that was
I
actually
see
a part
what
of the
you're saying.
manual.
And then, no, it was in part of the manual. And then underneath there were 3 discs, and each one had a little scallop out of the bottom of it, and or side of it, because they were all facing like this. And I couldn't figure what I was looking at. You got to remember, UFOs were really not what I was thinking about at the time. And so I looked at the other side, writing on next page. It was right across, and it said it was extraterrestrial craft. And
did it use those exact words, extraterrestrial
that's what
craft?
they had, extraterrestrial craft. And then everything went blank. And the next thing I remember is being up on a mountain, looking down into what looked like a black runway or something, with rows of helicopters all in a row, just one row, but a big, long row.
What kind of choppers do you remember?
They were all black. And I was looking down off this mountain, down into that, and all of a sudden one of them come up and started to come up, and it was just about, right about like that, and somebody grabbed me on my left side and said, "Get down, don't let them see you." That's the last I knew of that one. And I have a remembrance or recall of being sitting outside, out in a 3/4 truck with a canvas cover over the bed, and we're sitting on the wooden benches, and there was 3 across from me, and one of them I recognized as the guy we call Snake, and I don't remember who was there, and I was trying to look around, and it looked like a little plaza over there, not a plaza, but a dusty, no grass growing or anything, but kind of like what people look at as like a part of a park area. And then I looked past Snake, and he was sitting at the end, and I had a sign. There was a wall there, and there was a sign that said Cantina as a basin, and that's about it. And I don't have any more recall other than next thing on this trail in the jungle, and it branched off, and there was a signboard here, and it was saying something about a park, and I couldn't. And then next thing I know, I'm walking out on the trail, and there's 2 of us, and we're carrying this little person or whatever, and I don't. That's it. It's always fragmented. You never get anything, and I didn't go through regression for this. After I got with that other one, I said,
okay, so this is, that was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask. Did this come to you through the regression?
No.
This came to you after the regression, though?
They brought up the thing just enough so that I remembered that I'd been in Puerto Rico. And I always wondered about it because my wife worked, at that time I was married to another woman, and she was a top DAC. And I remember her, seems to me, I remember her asking me how was the trip to Puerto Rico. Well, she would have known because a lot of times she was a physician and all. She had a clearance. And I don't remember what I ever told her, but I always had wondered what was I doing in Puerto Rico. But, you just, whatever they do to you or whatever happened to me, it only comes in little glimpses. It's just, and
let's go through
get the full picture.
Sure, let's go back through some of the glances and glimpses that you had of your memory from the time period. You indicated that you're pretty sure that you left with just 6 of you.
There were 6 of us.
And a little bit later, and what you told us here is that you noticed one of the people you were sitting with in the back of the truck was a fellow by the name of Snake.
Right.
Now, was Snake somebody who went with you on this? Was he one of the 6?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
So he was actually one of the 6. Okay. Yeah. Now, when you went and made the nighttime jump like this at a very low altitude, had you ever done anything like that before?
Oh yeah, I've made 300, 400, 500 jumps.
Oh, okay. So coming in low to make a nighttime jump was not something totally out of the ordinary. Okay. And when you landed, do you recall seeing any of your other teammates?
No.
Nobody else. Just the buck sergeant coming up to you.
No, he was a staff. Those buck sergeants, I didn't know them either.
Right, you didn't know them.
I didn't know the man in the cage. That's really 3 people I knew.
But this was a sergeant buck sergeant that came up to you then shortly after you landed, and you had stowed your chute.
For some reason, I know the buck sergeant. I don't know why, but
you don't recall seeing the insignia.
Tell you the truth, I never worried much about rank.
Yeah.
So, I said, okay, you're a sergeant, so who cares? I outranked and I didn't even care.
Sure.
And that's the way we were. We were really rank conscious.
Okay. And when he brought you into the building that was like an old barracks and you went downstairs to the basement, was he still the person who was accompanying you? I mean, I take it that you
he was with me.
So you climbed into a Jeep?
He went with me, and he indicated where to go. He didn't talk.
You don't recall him
but that
saying
wasn't
anything?
new. Usually, when you're into a scenario, it's set up as a little war system, and so usually
So you're kind
he
of
doesn't
thinking,
really know anyways,
Right.
or like a messenger anyway.
It's like you're going through a war scenario, a battle scenario. It's a training
Whatever,
mission.
yeah,
That's kind of
training,
what you're thinking.
something.
Sure.
They had something to do with.
Okay, then when you go downstairs and you go down to the end of the basement and you're being given this manual, this document to read, when you look at it now, when you look back at it and you're looking down at it, what do you see on the front of it?
I didn't take the paper that was pinned on it, and I remember it was paper clips on, holding it, and that was the just a piece of cream-colored paper that had stamped. I want to say red, but I don't know. It could have been black. Top secret on it, top and bottom, and so I don't know what the manual said. I should have looked at the.
Do you recall seeing a code word on the front?
No, because you couldn't see the only thing I could see, it was pinned to the cover.
As if it was
And
trying to
so when I
cover
just
what
opened
the...
it, I was looking for pictures. I wasn't looking
Okay.
for...
So
it,
the paper that was pinned to, it was paper clipped to the front, it appeared as though it was trying to cover or block what the actual front of this manual was
Yes, it
saying?
was.
Okay.
I remember the first thing I hit, I didn't hit pictures. First thing, it was showing how to pack something in a certain size box or something. And next thing, I just went by that because it didn't sound like packing away
Didn't care.
equipment or something.
Right. Who cares?
Yeah. When I came, it was about, I'd say at least a third way through the book before I came upon the picture. And that, of course, that grabbed my interest. That was,
But then your 20 minutes were up, so you had to turn it back in again.
I was supposed to,
But you don't
everything
recall
went
that
blank.
happening, so nothing happened. So the next thing that you really remember seeing is being in the back of the three-quarter
I've been
ton.
up on that mountain.
Or being up in the mountain, correct. Now, you had obviously been around a lot of helicopters before, correct?
Yeah,
So
flown
if
a
you're
lot.
and flown in a lot. So if you're up in the mountain and you're looking down into this little bit of a valley where there's an airstrip, and you're looking at the copters, were these like a small Huey type? Were these big Chinooks?
Tell you the truth, I know they weren't Lokes, so they probably were Huey type or they've been in length. They weren't banana boats or stuff like that. I know my choppers, but I don't remember. They were just choppers sitting down there. It was.
And they were dark, and this was nighttime?
No, this was daytime.
This was
but
daytime.
It was black, that black tarmac, and the choppers were all sitting in a row. But it seems to me they were black, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I just remember seeing them, and all of a sudden one started coming up, and then that hand grabbed me by the shoulder and pushing on me and said, "Get down, don't let them see you." And,
Okay.
Okay, that was it.
And then that was the end of that little episode,
That little scenario.
that little scenario. So then the next thing is you're in the back of the truck.
Yeah. And that was, and Snake was sitting across from me. And
Snake is there. You see a little bit of a dirt patch, park-like area, and
That
you
was
also
on the
see the
right.
word
that was on the
cantina.
right, and the cantina
In the
was on the
building.
left.
Or-
No, it was on the cantina's on the left, and this is my right, this is my left. And the little park was around, but I couldn't see much because there's another guy sitting there, so I was kind of looking around him. But
Do you recall hearing anything? Music, people's voices?
Didn't hear it.
Nothing like that?
Nothing like that. I don't remember sound. Nothing.
Nothing like that?
Nothing I recall.
Okay. And then that ends, correct? And then the next thing you know,
I'm on that path.
you're on the path, and it's a path in a field, in
No,
woods,
it's
in a
up in
jungle.
jungles.
It's in a jungle.
See, we're jungle experts. We were trained. Actually, we were trained the same places that they trained the astronauts and stuff.
Okay.
So I have certificates for that, and so
So you're walking
I've been in the jungle since '64. So,
between Vietnam and your
yeah,
duty
so
in Central America.
I live in the jungle. I feel more comfortable that way than anything.
And so we're now walking down this path in the jungle, and you recall
No, it
another
was a path
soldier
going
with
up.
you.
Actually, it was just about a slope like this, and it branched off in two ways, and there was a sign there, and something about a park or something.
In English?
There was English, yeah.
It was in
I don't
English,
remember
okay.
seeing the Spanish.
You don't
but
remember seeing it in
I
Spanish?
read Spanish, so I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it.
Okay.
But it seems to me it was English. And then all of a sudden, I'm coming out of it. Only I'm coming out of a path, and there's two of us. Got this little person, but I can't. All I can see is his brown arm. I can't
Is the
see
person
that. I don't see their body. I just know it's there.
just there? And this is between the two of you?
Yeah, it wasn't heavy. It didn't seem. Of course, that don't mean anything.
So it's just walking with you, or are you holding?
No, we're kind of holding it up.
kind of holding it up.
Maybe because of a long stride or something. I don't know.
Okay.
And we're carrying weapons. I remember that.
Okay. And do you feel, as you're holding the entity up, do you recall again anything regarding body temperature, hot or cold,
No,
skin texture?
but there's one thing I do know. It was a friendly.
It was friendly. You didn't feel any fear.
No, we went in to locate it. It got lost from us, and it was a friendly.
Okay. Now this is not something that you
I have
mentioned
this
before, like
real
how.
strong emotion about that.
Okay. And talk about that. Why do you feel that emotion? Where is that coming from? That you feel as though this was part of the mission that you were doing?
Part of the mission. It had to be. The thing is, I don't want to read something into something that I've had people ask me these things
Right.
before.
Just what your sense is. You know, you're
For some
you're
reason,
looking
I
down.
had this sense that it was a friendly, and it wandered off, got lost, and I was bringing it back. I don't know. Maybe this is wrong, but I just had this feeling.
Okay. And the other soldier with you.
I don't remember who
Don't
it was.
remember who it was, so you don't know if it was anybody that was from your team or would have been at that time.
No, I would.
Now this is these events that have somewhat they're disjointed, so there's no connectivity between them. Are you associating these as all happening at the same time, as part of the same trip that you took?
The same trip.
It was definitely the same trip, but this all
Right.
happened within this time frame.
How many days we were there, I don't know. I have no length of time. We were used to, usually, even when I worked in SOG, it was 5 24-hour periods. And you didn't come out unless you had wounded or dead. So I would imagine that was the way it was with us there. I don't have a length of time.
Okay.
No time reference.
No time
one
reference
way,
to it at
or
all.
other. And for some reason, I didn't have never focused on that.
Okay.
So and nothing ever come forward if it did.
And nothing else more regarding the mission itself, what you might have been doing or why you were doing it, other than, I believe your quote was, you felt as though this fellow wandered off somewhere.
That's what I had this, or I still have this feeling for. It was like there was nothing to fear because this was one of ours, or not one of ours. For some reason, I had this idea he just wandered off and had somehow gotten lost in the jungle, and for some reason they'd sent for us to go in. Why they wouldn't take people from their own deal, but.
Do you have a sense of where you're taking him?
No. Don't even remember. It was just fleeting of just carrying it.
Okay.
And having this feeling, but that was about it.
And when you came back to the base, do you recall being flown back to the base or arriving at the base?
I don't remember returning at all.
Don't remember returning at all. While you were there, and you said you saw a snake in the truck, do you recall anything else that happened there? Being in you saw the helicopter come up, correct? Do you recall being on a helicopter ride with Snake while you were there?
No, I don't remember Snake even being there, looking down at the choppers, or for that matter, I don't remember Snake other than that one time he's sitting on the edge there. Snake was a tall black guy and slender build, but he had the same rank as I was. So, but he never. I don't remember him even looking over at me. I just remember him being there.
Just being there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't remember anything else with him during this episode that you felt as though you were in Puerto Rico?
No.
And do you have any other reason to really think that that's where you're at, was Puerto Rico, beyond what your wife at the time mentioned about your trip to Puerto Rico?
For some reason, I got this odd belief it was Roosevelt Roads, but I don't know where that comes from.
Okay.
I've never been in Puerto Rico other than that.
Other than that,
Yeah.
Okay. While you were then coming back from this, and you really don't recall the trip itself back again, you were perhaps during this particular trip, or perhaps this was on another trip that you would have been on with Snake. You were out over the ocean.
But they tried to kill us.
Yeah. Now, was that part of this particular trip, or
No.
was that a totally
That was
different?
a totally different one.
Okay.
I don't remember telling you that.
Why don't you? Well, actually, first let's finish up a little bit, and then we'll go back to that. Okay. So you came back to Panama, and in Panama, your wife is now telling you about this trip to Puerto Rico. That
she
knows that
tell
you've
me.
been.
She just said, "How was your trip?"
How was your trip?
Yeah. But I don't remember what I said to her. I don't even remember, for that matter, even acknowledging it.
Okay.
I thought maybe she was talking about something else. I didn't pay much attention, probably.
So you don't recall any debriefing or anything else that occurred after you came back from something like that?
And usually when, if it was a live mission, I was debriefed by intelligence officers, but there was no
There's no recollection of that
no.
happening either. Okay. All right. Then
In fact, I was the intelligence officer, so it's probably kind of hard to debrief myself. For the land, for emergency medic side.
Sure. Okay. Then another incident that occurred while you were there is we touched on a little bit there, was you and Snake being in a helicopter out over the ocean. And why don't you tell me about that story? About why were you in the helicopter? What was going on?
You want the story on that?
Sure, the story on that. That I know it's somewhat different here, but
this was another one where they came in and picked us up at night.
Who's the they?
The C-130 was out there at a deserted field. Where this field is, I've never been able to determine. Remember, there was grass growing on it, but it had to be pretty, at least a 4,000 footer if it's going to take and run C-130s off of it. But I remember that was a full team, and it was supposedly CIA pilot, co-pilot, not a jump master, crew chief, I guess you'd call him. And they came down to pick us up, or supposedly from Virginia, and because I guess they had, the way we understood it, or I understood it, just they had to get some time and whatever the time had to be with flying time.
Logging some air hours or something, sure.
And anyway, they flew us around for about 3 or 4 hours, and then we got the red light, and Snake was the first in the door, and he was just ready to go, and he looked down, and he seen phosphorus on the waves, and he said, "No," he says, "I'm not jumping." We didn't have flotation devices or anything. He says, and of course we got weapons and stuff, and to weighed it down. He says, "I'm not going." He says, "That's water." And the crew chief started jumping up and down and started pushing. And that's when I can remember one of the guys grabbed the crew chief and slung him aside. And he says, I went over and looked out the door, and well, they were arguing. And then they said, well, their excuses are they were flying with a road map. And I don't remember who went up to see what was going up on top, or in the cockpit. And but we refused to go, and then we were supposed to have a designated drop zone that had an A on it to designate it was our drop zone. Well, then they took us out up to by Costa Rica, and they dropped us over a beer factory. And I came down, and I on one side of the fence, and I shoot on the other, and here comes this gray thing, just boom, boom, coming down. And I thought, well, here's one of those Brahmas they have up there. That scared the hell out of me. And instead, it was a big old gray mare. But we had people hanging in the wires and everything.
What a mess.
Over by the beer factory. Because
now, why? Was there any other recollection of why they were trying to get you to jump out over the ocean?
We weren't the only ones. There were others that had been taken up and they tried to get rid of too. And I don't know if it's because my past or the present at that time as to why they did this. I have no idea. But there was a expose, so to speak, on CNN. I think it's CNN with or NBC, one of the two. Can't remember the woman's name. Anyway, she found this had been happening to. We weren't the only ones that they tried to do this to.
People that had been in similar roles as your
team. I could give you more information if I had the paperwork.
Oh, that's okay. Here. I was just looking for some of the details that you might remember regarding why something like this would have occurred, or if anything else was said from, as you said, the crew chief who was trying to somewhat force Snake to actually make the jump.
Yeah, and if as a stick would have went out, of course they'd have followed him without thinking much about it. Your static line just went out. Following the man behind you, because once you're over a drop zone, you don't hesitate because you want to get all
together. Yeah, you're going quickly
land together in that area. But that was one of those.
But nothing else further came of that. Nobody said anything to you about it afterwards.
No, even though we made a complaint, which I'm sure whoever's my commander at the time. Not top commander, I'm talking to team commander. I don't even remember if I was team sergeant at the time. But
okay.
And people left and you just took over their slots up the line. That's about where it worked.
And the crew chief or the jump master who was trying to get Snake to make this jump, was this person Army or was this person CIA?
No, they were all in
All in civvies?
no, well, he had on a gray jumpsuit, so I don't know if it was Air Force or whatever, it could have been. You have to remember, CIA has its own Air Force.
Right.
Or they had a couple of them, in fact. When it was in Vietnam, it was Air America, and they also had the Blackbirds and stuff, and I used to fly with all of this. But my background was, this would have happened probably about the same time when they were running Watchtower. So now you bring it to mind, that is when maybe the way they were trying to get rid of me, or us, I don't know. People on the team each have jobs, and a lot of times we just don't pay attention to what the other person's doing. If he usually says, well, I've got to go do this, or I'm on this, or you don't have a need to know, and he does. Mm-hmm. We work as a team, but we also work spread out into our expertise. And at that Watchtower was running drugs out of Colombia and running weapons into Colombia and bringing drugs out. Mm-hmm. And we were working for the what was it called, Operation Watchtower.
Okay.
It was supposed to have been a CIA setup, but of course they disclaim it, even though the people that were running it were CIA and
sure.
Assad.
Not going to be something they're going to admit to.
And also Noriega.
Right.
He was involved.
Okay. So with that, why don't we take a little break here and give ourselves a chance to drink a little water and relax a little bit, and we'll jump back into it here for part 2. Okay, the next area I'd like to get into and discuss is your period of service that you had in Europe, and I believe specifically when you were in France. And while there, in a previous conversation that we had, you told us about a sighting that you had apparently with quite a few other people, and you had somebody with you. Why don't you tell us about that night in France when you had your sighting?
It wasn't a night, actually. It was in the afternoon, and it was a summer day, nice, and actually I was taking my family to the Air Force Base at Évreux-Fauville to see a movie, and we had to go up this French country road that made a curve and then paralleled the Autobahn. And just as I was coming to the curve, I could see people outside their cars and pointing up the sky and stuff.
So they had pulled off to the side of the road?
All cars just parked right. Well, French, they park wherever they want to park.
They just stop.
And I mean, I thought, well, then maybe this is a piss call, because that's usually what they do. It's mass. But no, in actuality, it was people just looking at this huge thing in the sky. It was so huge, it was so big, that it actually covered the entire Air Force Base. You could see the Air Force Base. We were about, I would say at least about 4 clicks from it. So you could see the entire thing was runways and everything. And it had runways, in fact, one of the longer runways, because they did use C-130, that was in 1960 I had this sighting. But they've been using that for about 10 years or so, or after the war. I guess it doesn't really matter who had it all, but it was a well-developed Air Force Base. Okay. And this thing was like a huge half dome, and it was fiery orange red, and it wasn't flames coming off. It was just like it was really hot metal. like you put a pan on a stove and just let it get hot.
Get red hot.
Red
Sure.
hot. That's what it was. And it was flat on the bottom totally, as I remember it, and then had a slight curve. It was about like this, like that, and then straight across. But it was covered. It covered, from what I could see, I remember seeing, the entire Air Force Base, buildings, everything. And that was the last I heard about that. I recall about it. I don't know if we went to the movies that day. I don't remember anything. I don't remember going home. We never discussed it that I can remember. But there was one thing toward the end of my being there. I was at a little base called St. Andre, and so it was a secure base for whatever they had. I didn't know what it was they actually dealt in. But until just before I left there, I remember there was a lot of sightings being reported in France, and they were putting it in the Army, I think they are, Stars and Stripes.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was. But it really became quite frequent after that, because that's when I got back, I met Bob Dean, and then Bob went over there and he got to read the assessment.
Okay. Now, when jump into a little bit more of the details there, what was the Air Force Base that this was over?
Évreux-Fauville.
Okay.
It was right outside of Évreux, France, in Normandy, France.
Okay. And when did this occur? This is 1960, 61? 1960. In
right.
Summertime, I guess? Or?
It is late 60, early 61. I think it was 60, though. I don't have an exact year on that. I can't remember.
But you remember it was late afternoon?
It was about 3 in the afternoon. It was pretty nice.
And when you said that you saw this craft over the Air Force Base, was it actually out over the base itself, or between you and the base?
No, it was directly over the base. Or the way I was looking at it, it was directly over the base. How others might have looked at it. I was only 4,000 meters at the most from there. 4 clicks, and it wasn't that far, especially in that area. It's all flat. You can, other than from maybe a hedgerow that's about 5 foot tall, you can see right out to the auto.
Sure, nothing else to block it.
Right.
Okay. And obviously everybody else that is pulling off to the side of the road here is seeing this also. Do you recall people commenting about what they were seeing, or were you just more focused on what you're seeing
just
yourself?
Just a lot of cars stopped where they're at, and people standing outside pointing at it and conversing with it between themselves. These are all French, and my French is limited, so I probably didn't go over and ask him anything. I had that fear that it was like, if you killed a chicken, you've got to pay for that chicken's life for the rest of your life. That's the way it was. That's the law in France. So how many eggs it'll produce? Babies.
So when you pulled over and you stepped out, now are you dressed in uniform, or you're in
I was in
civilian?
clothes.
Okay, you're in civilian.
That I do remember. When I wasn't on duty, I didn't wear anything but civilian clothes.
Okay, and you were driving a civilian vehicle then, not an Army vehicle?
No,
okay. When you were looking at the craft now over the base, what would you have estimated its height over the base?
I would probably say it was at least 5,000 feet, or maybe 10. It looked, as I see it in my mind, is about 5,000 feet, but that doesn't mean anything. It was huge. I just remember it was like what somebody would describe as a mothership. It was so big. I mean, it could have been made on Earth. It had to either been made in orbit or on a planet where you got plenty of nothing. you know.
Okay, so the size of the base, and as you said, this base probably had 4,000 or 5,000 foot runway.
4,000 foot
4,000
runways that
foot
I know
runway.
of. I mean, I don't know exactly what their runways were, but I always look at it when you have a C-130, you have to have a lot of runway to
Right.
get in on and off.
So you're talking about something that's probably pretty close to a mile across.
Probably very,
Close to a mile, give or take, whatever.
well,
Now,
1,800 feet. Was it?
5,000
5,280
5,280 feet.
280 feet in a mile. So yeah, I was.
Okay.
Oh, meters always screwed me up.
Me too. And you indicated the color was this orangish, reddish, like heat type color.
It was
Now,
like it was glowing red.
it was glowing. Could you see
Orange red.
the?
In fact, that no, that isn't a good color.
Could you see the heat waves coming off of it?
No, I don't remember.
So this
heat
was more
waves.
just of a.
It was had just this huge color of red, and whether we were abducted or anybody was abducted or anything happened, I don't know. As to why, I don't have any remembrance of missing time. But then, just as in the first, I never questioned the time. I had no. I don't know how long I was observing it, as well as how long it was up there, or how
Sure.
long what I did. I don't remember going to the movies. I don't remember anything beyond that point.
Do you recall, while you were viewing the craft, do you recall any jets or airplanes in the air at the time while it was over the base?
No, I don't recall anything like that. No, I don't recall any. Don't even recall any traffic on the Autobahn. So maybe they were stopped too. I don't know.
Could have been right. Everybody stopping to look since it was so large and it was a sunny day. And
It was just hovering there. I mean,
just-
it wasn't jumping up and down or anything.
right. It was stationary.
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't recall it moving at all when you got back into the car?
I don't remember getting in the car.
The next thing you remember is being at the movies?
No. Don't remember anything. Just don't remember anything beyond that sighting. I don't remember. Don't know if we went to movies. I don't know if we. Must have just went. If we went home, it wasn't no discussion about it because probably didn't remember.
Okay. And is this something that a memory that came back to you after you had your hypnotherapy, or is this something that you've remembered from
I'd
that
remembered
time?
before, but it was such. It's you have to remember. Look at it like this. I want to say remember. It's like redundancy, but every time it happens, it's there's no recall of like an hour later you wake up from from anesthesia or something. You don't have that. You just don't have any recall of it at all.
Well, Bill, this has been a wonderful adventure here tonight, and once again I want to thank you for taking us into your home and being so gracious. You know, we've spent about 2.5 hours talking here now about your various adventures and experiences, and again I want to thank you for sharing them with us. It's very much appreciated, and it's quite a life that you've led, and I'm happy that you.
Well, actually, nobody forced me. There was
Except for a few times.
well, mostly all. Well, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It was just easy. It was just an easy life. That was all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's me. I'll take advantage of anything.
Sure. And now you got a wonderful life here in Sonoma, and it's a beautiful place.
Well, that's
we could come
what
up here
came
and
out of it.
visit.
That's what works.
Sure. Led to you being here with your wonderful wife, and it's a great life that you have here.
Well, appreciate you taking interest in it, but I didn't want to take and kind of surprising me. I just kind of forget these things anymore. And then every time somebody starts in this bit about having me speak or something, or then it all starts coming back, and then I start wondering what the hell happened all over again. I really don't have the answers.
Well, that's great that we could do it, though, and it's I know it can be difficult to recall and pull together bits and pieces of a memory like that, and there's an awful lot that can affect it, especially when you're going through experiences like that. So once again, thank you for it, and you've shared some wonderful things with us.
Taking the time to hear it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.